Groups of protesters from different regions of Peru's southern part marched towards Lima for its second takeover. Violent clashes broke out in Tel Aviv between the police and demonstrators over the government's judicial reform. And Nigeria's ruling party candidate, Bola Tinubi, wins the nation's presidential elections as opposition parties outcry the polls as fraudulent. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. And now we begin with the news. In Peru, groups of protesters from different regions of the southern part of the country have mobilized towards the capital for a second takeover of Lima. This new wave of protests, led by social organizations from the southern city of Puno, has been named the second wave of the takeover of Lima. In the first takeover of Lima, hundreds gathered at the University Mayor of San Marcos to protest against President Boluarte's government. Although they caused some damage in the capital, the demonstrators failed to achieve their goal, breaking through the police ditch to reach the government palace and the Congress of the Republic. In Brazil, Lula da Silva's government will give a maximum of 60 days to register all firearms in civilian hands in the federal police system. The determination contained in the ordinance of the Ministry of Justice as of this Wednesday seeks to strengthen controls over the circulation of firearms and obeys what was stipulated by the Brazilian president in a decree when he became head of state. The government intends to concentrate all records of weapons in the hands of civilians, including those used by hunters and collectors, which are currently controlled by the army. With this measure, President Lula da Silva intends to undo the proliferation of weapons promoted by the administration of Jair Bolsonaro, where more than 1 million weapons were sold and many of them ended up in the hands of criminal gangs that dominate several areas of the country. In Uruguay, the search for disappeared people during the dictatorship between 1968 and 1975 continues. A multidisciplinary team undertook actions in a military property where it is presumed that there may be burials of those victims. Two retired military officers who claim to have information, together with representatives of the Ministry of Defense, anthropologists, and authorities of the National Human Rights Institution, visited Campo Vidiela, which is part of the 14th Parachute Infantry Battalion in the adjacent department of Canelones. The exploration of the land will continue to determine the possible existence of bone remains. Local media assures that there are still 197 missing detainees in Uruguay. And Argentina announced the temporary suspension of exports of meat and other poultry products after confirming the first case of highly pathogenic avian influenza H5 in a chicken from the province of Rio Negro. According to a communique issued by the National Agri-Food Health and Quality Service, SENASA, the country temporarily loses its disease-free status and self-suspends the export of poultry products. The authorities also announced the forthcoming notification of the situation to the World Organization for Animal Health. Argentina was forced to take this decision in compliance with international regulations, which require the restriction of foreign trade when diseases such as bird flu are detected in animals intended for human consumption. On Wednesday, a firefighter died inside a burning commercial building in downtown Buffalo, New York, where a fire and a sudden blast sent flames and smoke billowing into the street. According to preliminary information provided by Fire Commissioner William Rinaldo, firefighters responded to a call at a theatrical costume store in downtown Buffalo at about 10 a.m. local time. The firefighter had been reported missing shortly after crews arrived at the building. Rinaldo said that the situation quickly deteriorated and firefighters had to evacuate to escape the collapsing interior. Investigations are still underway to find the cause of the accident, although reports point to the fact fact that it may be caused by workers handling tortures in the area. Now we move on to other topics. In the province of Holguin, in Cuba, the forest fire continues. It has been raging in the place for approximately 11 days. The forest fire has consumed more than 3,600 hectares of forest and forced the evacuation of more than 100 people in the Pinalito and 21 de Abril communities. The evacuees live in the municipality of Mella, threatened by the proximity of the fire, which could spread from the Pinares de Mayari mountains to neighboring Santiago de Cuba. According to the Forest Ranger Corps, the fire started as a result of the severe drought affecting the country, the speed of the winds, and the uneven terrain. Firefighters, foresters, the army, health workers, and the Red Cross are fighting the disaster that has affected the habitat of valuable native flora and fauna. And the UN High Commission for Refugees warned the urgency of assisting millions of people in the Horn of Africa, a region which is experiencing one of the longest and most severe droughts on record. The Commission stated that the climate change crisis affects more than 8 million people in Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya. The agency asked the international community for at least $137 million to assist the population displaced by the lack of food and livelihood. According to a UN forecast, the uprooted population could total 300,000 by July 2023. Let's take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. At least 42 people have been reported dead, while thousands remained hospitalized after a head-on train collision in northern Greece early Wednesday. The accident occurred when a freight train and a passenger train collided head-on in the valley of Temple near Athens, crumpling carriages into twisted steel knots in what has been considered the country's worst-ever rail crash. The passenger train was traveling from Athens to Thessaloniki, carrying 350 people. Many of them were students returning from the carnival celebrations. While the track is double, both trains were traveling in opposite directions on the same line. Authorities arrested the station master at the train's last stop in the city of Larissa. They did not release the men's names or the reason for the arrest, but the station master is responsible for the rail traffic on that stretch of the tracks. The cause of the collision is still under investigation.
So far, 38 dead have been retrieved. Of the 72 patients, 15 have already been discharged, and 57 remain in hospital, 6 of them in intensive care. During this rescue operation, 194 passengers were transported with 5 buses to Thessaloniki, 20 passengers with a 6th bus to Larissa, and 8 passengers were transported to Katerini.
We remind you that the 59-year-old Greek citizen has been arrested by police in Larissa, while the preliminary investigation continues. In total, 70 police officers have been deployed to the scene of the accident and at Larissa General Hospital. Relatives of those who died and were injured have been directed to the relevant hospitals.
On Thursday, riot police in Athens clashed with civilians protesting outside the offices of Greece's rail operations amid anger over the country's poor records on railway safety. Protests were also reported in the cities of Thessaloniki and Larissa, near the point where a passenger train with 356 people on board and a freight train with 2 train drivers collided head-on when they were traveling on the same tracks in opposite directions on Tuesday night. Infrastructure and Transport Minister Kostas Karamanlis resigned after acknowledging that his efforts to improve the railway system had not been enough to prevent the accident. Now we move on to other topics. The Russian Defense Ministry on Wednesday confirmed it prevented a massive drone attack on Crimea, adding that a total of 10 drones were either shot down or disabled.
An attempt by the Kiev regime to carry out a massive drone attack on the facilities of the Crimean Peninsula has been prevented. 6 unmanned Ukrainian strike vehicles were shot down by air defense systems. Another 4 Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles have been disabled by electronic combat equipment. There were no casualties or destruction on the ground.
On Tuesday, the Japanese parliament approved a record military budget of $50 billion for the country's new defense development program. According to Japan's lower house, the country will have the ambitious defense development program this year, with expenditures that in excess of $300 billion, an increase of more than 50% from the current 5-year plan. The total state budget is awaiting approval by the upper house and includes more than $830 billion. In addition, it is estimated that at least $1.55 billion is earmarked for the purchase of cruise missiles with a range of up to 1,600 kilometers, and more than $800 million will go to missile launching related software and hardware and staff training. And the Workers' Party of North Korea concluded a major plenary by proposing a series of goals to improve agricultural production. The plenary session, which was held over 4 days at the party's Central Committee, a building in Pyongyang, set forth a medium and long-term strategy for the final solution of the rural question. Among the 4 matters discussed in the meeting was a review of the agricultural policies implemented in 2022, the implementation of a national economic plan, the improvement of the state's financial work, and organizational matters. In this sense, North Korean head of state Kim Jong-un called for the production and supply of more new and high-efficient farm machines to the rural communities as the most effective way in putting the agricultural production on a modern and advanced basis. Vietnam's National Assembly elected Vo Van Thuan as the new president of the Southeast Asian nation at its 4th extraordinary session. With 98.38% of the National Assembly's membership, the body passed a resolution on the election of the new head of state. Under the resolution, Thuan, who is a member of the Politburo and the permanent member of the 13th Party Central Committee's Secretariat, will serve as the president of Vietnam in the 2022 to 2026 tenure. Taking the oath of office, the youngest president in the country's political history vowed to stay absolutely loyal to the fatherland, the people, and the constitution, and work hard to complete all tasks assigned by the party, the state, and the people. Meanwhile, Vietnam Deputy Prime Minister Tran Lưu Quang began an official visit to Spain, where he met with the President of the Congress of Deputies of Spain, Meritxell Batet, in Madrid. During the meeting, the Vietnamese diplomat affirmed his country's determination to work together with Spain in elevating the two countries' strategic partnership to a new period of development. Welcoming the Vietnamese delegation, the host leader stated that Spain always treasures and wishes to enhance multifaceted ties with Vietnam, as well as a comprehensive partnership and cooperation between both nations. TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Violent clashes broke out on Wednesday in Tel Aviv between police and demonstrators, denouncing the anti-democratic nature of the government's judicial reform. The marchers were dispersed with water cannons, tear gas and sound grenades by the police, which blocked several streets and roads in the city. The protests have taken place for the past 2 months and have brought together tens of thousands of people, but have not prevented the controversial reform from moving forward. The reform was announced in early January by the government formed in December by Netanyahu, with ministers from right-wing, ultra-right, and ultra-Orthodox Jewish formations. According to its detractors, the text, which seeks to reduce the influence of the judiciary to the benefit of the political power, threatens the separation of powers and the democratic character of Israel. And the first G20 foreign ministers meeting began on Wednesday in New Delhi, the capital of India, with the Ukrainian crisis as one of the central topics of the talks among the foreign ministers, and the tensions between Chinese, Russia, and the United States also on the meeting's goals. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken shared the same room for the first time since July 2022. During the meeting, the delegates observed a minute's silence in tribute to the victims of the earthquake in Turkey and Syria. In his speech, the Russian Foreign Minister urged an end to unilateral sanctions, while calling for a fair and speedy investigation into the attacks on the Nord Stream gas pipelines. For his part, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi sent a message to those present in which he called on the G20 countries to reach a consensus on the pressing global challenges and not to allow differences over geopolitical tensions to affect cooperation. Nigeria's ruling party candidate, Bola Tinubi, wins the nation's presidential election and called on his rivals and supporters to join hands in the midst of accusations of electoral fraud. The 70-year-old former Lagos governor was declared the winner of Saturday's election, securing his lifelong ambition of heading Africa's most populous nation. The Independent National Electoral Commission confirmed Tinubu as the president-elect after he secured the required number of votes across the two-thirds of Nigeria's states, a rule meant to ensure the broad representation. The election was marked by long delays and slow arrival of online results, angering voters and opposition parties who claimed massive vote rigging. Tinubu asked his opponents to join him to rebuild the national home. Candidates have 21 days after the results were announced to contest the election. And the Labour Party's vice president candidate Yusuf Dari Baba Ahmed questioned the election's result and claimed the victory for his party, which ended up third in Saturday's elections.
That the purported result did not meet the minimum criteria of a transparent, free and fair election. We went into the elections as Labour Party. We won the election as Labour Party. We are going to claim our mandate as Labour Party, and we shall rescue Nigeria as Labour Party.
In Nigeria, United Nations Assistant Secretary General Amina Mohammed has called on African leaders to invest in local solutions to address regional environmental challenges. Following the 9th session of the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, Amina Mohammed said that the global and African leaders should set clear targets to reduce poverty and inequality by 2027 and 2030. She said governments of the African continent must ensure that emerging green and digital economies help Africans and the national environment, and that the key to the implementation will be the inclusion of young people. And the Congolese citizens went on a demonstration on Wednesday against the arrival of French president in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC. Outside the French embassy in Kinshasa, protesters chanted against Macron's arrival, some waving Russian flags. They also accused Emmanuel Macron of backing Rwanda, which they hold responsible for growing insecurity in eastern DRC. The eastern stretch of the country has been beset by violence for nearly 30 years, with numerous armed groups active, among them the M23 fighters, whom locals accuse Kigali of supporting. The French president kicked off a Central African tour on Wednesday and is expected in DRC later this week. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.